the Mishnah in Sukkah and the Mishnah in Shabbat. We said over here, when it came to Sukkah, we said that if you were in middle, morning, Jaime.
Morning, Rabbi.
Morning. We're on 38a. Yesterday we were discussing if a person was middle of his meal, he came home from traveling, it was the middle of his meal, and really he came home from traveling. We said he's supposed to go ahead and take the lulav and the etrog, but he did not take the lulav and the etrog right away, and he started his meal. So we said, you know what he's supposed to do? He's supposed to stop his meal and take the lulav and the etrog immediately. That's what we said. And however, we contrasted that by a case when it comes to mincha, that you shouldn't start washing on bread if it's time for mincha. And first you're supposed to daven mincha. But if you went ahead and you washed on the bread before you daven mincha, we don't say you have to go in and stop your meal. You could continue your meal, and after your meal, you go ahead and you would say you would pray the mincha. So the Gemara says it seems to be contradictory. Why in one place do you say you have to stop your meal, and one place said you don't have to stop your meal? Both places you were not supposed to start your meal, and yet we are more lenient when it comes to mincha than when it comes to the mitzvah of lulav and etrog. So that was the question of the Gemara. So the Gemara recorded that Rav Safra said that it depends on the situation. At what time of the day are you eating this meal, whether you'll have time to do the mitzvah that you need to do. So the case of mincha is that you started eating, but there was a big window left that you could pray mincha after you finish the meal. So therefore, the rabbis did not say you have to interrupt your meal. But in the case of the lulav case, there was not sufficient time. It was concerned that will not be sufficient time after the meal for you to go ahead and to take the lulav. So therefore, because the concern was that by the time you end the meal, it'll already be dark. And like we said, the mitzvah of lulav is only during the daytime. So therefore, they said you should stop your meal in order to do the lulav and esrog. That's the Gemara's question. That's the Gemara's answer. Rava says, I have a different answer. What's the question? Rava says maybe a mitzvah min Torah, biblical mitzvah, like taking lulav and etrog, we're going to go ahead and be more strict and say you must stop your meal and to do the mitzvah lulav and etrog. Even if you would have time to continue your meal and to do the lulav and etrog after the meal, but because it's a biblical mitzvah, they were more strict. But when it comes to mincha, which is a rabbinic mitzvah, so then we said maybe they wouldn't be as strict, and they would say, you continue your meal, and after your meal you'll pray mincha, even though you should not have started to begin. That was Rava's point. So what did Rava say? Ella Amar Rava. So now we're up to that point in the Gemara. Ella Amar Rava. We're now on 38. Welcome back, Max. We're on 38a2. 38a2. Ella Amar Rava. So Rava answers this apparent contradiction, saying, so Rava says there's no contradiction. The answer is pretty obvious. Morning, Mark.
Morning, Rabbi.
Okay, just to bring everybody up to date, Mark and Max. We started a new Mishnah yesterday, where the Mishnah talks about that the mitzvah of lulav and etrog technically could be performed the whole day. There's a window. Daytime is the window for the mitzvah, but nevertheless, we said you're supposed to do it early part of the day. You're not supposed to delay a mitzvah. And the Mishnah stated, if a guy came back from traveling and he comes home, he's supposed to do the mitzvah right away. But if he forgot to do the mitzvah right away and he started eating, he has to stop his meal to take the lulav and the etrog. And the Gemara questioned that. Why is it? The Gemara said that when the Gemara in Shabbat, when it comes to mincha, everyday mincha, it says that you're not allowed to start a bread meal, a meal which we'll interpret as a bread meal when it's time to daven mincha. rather you should go ahead and pray mincha first. And we said yesterday, of course, if you have a minyan later, you could start your bread meal, but we said you should not start your bread meal if it's time for davening mincha. But if you started your bread meal, we say you do not have to stop your bread meal. You can continue in your bread meal, and after your bread meal, you can go ahead and pray mincha. So the question is, morning, Simon. The question is, how do we explain why are we more lenient by mincha that we allow you to continue the meal even though it was started not properly, and why by lulav we don't allow you to continue your meal? You have to stop your meal and take lulav right away. So that was and Rava wants to suggest that maybe because it's a biblical mitzvah, that lulav is a biblical mitzvah, they were more strict. They said you must stop your meal, do the lulav right now. But when it comes to the mitzvah of mincha, which is a rabbinic mitzvah, maybe they were more lenient that even though you should not have started your meal, but if you started, they said you could wait till after the end of the meal to pray the mincha. That's what Rava said. So now the Gemara says, Ela Amar Rava. Rava says he says there is no question between the mitzvah of lulav and the mitzvah of mincha. He sees a clear difference because one's biblical and one's rabbinic, and therefore we're more strict by the biblical mitzvah. But what is the question? Eli kasha hakasha. This is the question. Again, we are on 38a2. This is the question that Rav Safra was coming to address. You know, sometimes you have a recording that the rabbi made it. We have a recording. What's clear is Rav Safra made a distinction between when you have time or when you don't have time. But we don't know what was the cases that we're referring to. Now Rava, meaning the Gemara till now thought that Rav Safra's statement of time and not time was applying to these two cases, these two different Mishnayot, one regarding mincha and one regarding lulav. Rav Safra was saying that in the case of mincha, you had time, therefore you continue your meal. In the case of lulav, you didn't have time. If you're going to continue your meal, you won't have time to perform the mitzvah of lulav. That's what we had the recording of Rav Safra saying before. But now we're saying Rav is going to say a different understanding of what Rav Safra was coming to say. We'll see it now. Here, hakasha. This is what seems to be a problem. The problem is not a contradiction between the law of mincha and the law of lulav. It's the contradiction in the law of lulav itself. This Mishnah itself seems to be going in two opposite directions. And that's the issue that we have to deal with. And that's the issue that Rav Safra is coming to address. Hakasha. It says, this is the problem. It says when you came back from your travels, you come into your house, it says, the Mishnah stated, you should take, it says, and you did not, and you started eating, you have to take the lulav by your table, so to speak. Stop the meal for that time, take the lulav, shake the lulav in all the directions. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You stop your meal to take the lulav. We see that you have to stop your meal in order to perform the mitzvah of lulav. But then the Mishnah says, then the Mishnah says, lo natal shachrit. The Mishnah says, if you did not take the lulav in the morning, yital ben arbayim. It says that, you know what? If you didn't take the lulav in the morning, you take it in the afternoon, right? Why? Because the whole day is kosher for lulav. The fact that so the Gemara's understanding that the fact that you're telling me if you have that whole day, that whole window of the whole day, would seem to indicate if you want to go ahead and continue your meal, you could go ahead and continue your meal and until you have because you have the afternoon to go ahead and perform the mitzvah. So it seems to indicate that statement that you have the Mishnah stating that if you didn't take it in the morning, you take it in the afternoon, would seem to say that you have time, and therefore, since you have time, you don't have to interrupt your meal. So the Gemara says, Omar Rav Safra, to that, Rav Safra says no. Lo kacha. There's no, it's not the Mishnah that says you have, but the Mishnah that says that you could, which seems to indicate that you can continue eating because you have the whole day. That's because because we're talking about that you have time. You let's say you started eating a meal, the morning meal. You started eating the morning meal. You should not have started eating the morning meal until you had breakfast. You should not have had breakfast until you take the lulav. But you know what? You have the afternoon to take the lulav. So if you started your meal and you should not have started, you have the afternoon to you still have a lot of time left. However,
So that's the avar, no?
right after the fact, you should not lechatchila, you should not have started your meal until you
But
take
if
the
you
lulav.
did, you could finish it. So let's go. Let's ask. Let me ask in practical terms. If you're ready to pray shacharit and you don't have a lulav in it, you don't have one, and it's time to say kriyat shema, and it's even time to do all your davening. So you would theoretically pray without a lulav in etrog, and you could take the lulav in etrog and say Hallel later in the day. Well, I don't know if you'd have to say
Correct.
Hallel. Okay.
Correct. You could say Hallel later in the day as well. We don't
So now,
recommend delaying Hallel, but technically you
right,
could say Hallel the whole day.
right. So that's A. B. Now comes time for mincha. It's one, whatever, plaga mincha or whatever, and it's time to say mincha. You would say Hallel with the etrog after you pray mincha, before you pray mincha.
So that you're getting into another question, Mark. The question of tadir v'she'ena tadir. Tadir. If you have two mitzvot in front of you, and which one goes first? So a lot of times there's the rule: the more frequent mitzvah would go first. So therefore,
First.
that might indicate that first you should daven the mincha, and then you should go ahead and take the lulav and the etrog. But it has to be researched. Would there be any difference between the first day of Yom Tov and the other days? Because the first day of Yom Tov, the lulav is manat Torah. The other days are Rabbanan. So when it's the other days, so it matches mincha. Mincha is the Rabbanan responsibility, and lulav is the Rabbanan responsibility. The other days, but the question would be, in the first day of Yom Tov, would it be any different? Because the mitzvah of lulav the first day, would we give because it's a biblical mitzvah? I don't know. Good morning, Morris. If that would that trump the law of tadir v'she'ena tadir of the more frequent mitzvah? If the less frequent mitzvah is a biblical mitzvah, that would be a good question that would have to be researched.
So theoretically, day one, you might do the
you might do the lulav. You might do the lulav first, perhaps.
But
that's the
but Hol HaMoed or whatever after the first day.
Mincha should be
probably
first.
Be mincha first.
Right, exactly.
Now, if you come home and you started your meal, and the guy walked in with the lulav and etrog and said, "Here, I got your lulav and etrog."
So that would be right.
So that
would be that case is the two different opinions of the Gemara. This opinion of the Gemara. This opinion in the Gemara is going to say you would not have to stop your meal because if you have a lot of time left after your meal, if as long as you know you're going to finish your meal with enough time to take the lulav, you're good. You don't have to stop your meal. That's this opinion. But the other opinion, in the Gemara was, it depends. The other opinion says it depends if it's a deraita. If it's a deraita, maybe you would stop your meal right away, even if there's time in the day. That is the.
Is that a rule, Rabbi? Tadir v'she'eno tadir kodem, unless it's the oraita versus the Rabbanan? Does that block the rule?
Again, like I said, right the first Rabbanan, we'd have to see what the halacha would be. But in general, that is the rule. Tadir v'she'eno tadir. That's why you have the mitzvah. Some say, by the way, the reason why you put on your talit first and then your tefillin is because talit is 7 days a week and tefillin is 6 days a week. So some say that's the reason that some give, that why you put on your talit first, because it's more frequent than the mitzvah of tefillin. Others say You put on your talit first because you want to go up in holiness. You go from talit, one level of holiness, and you go into another level of holiness of tefillin. But we have also, look, if you look at in the Torah readings, let's say we have when it's Rosh Chodesh, right? And Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. We first take out the Torah of the weekly portion, and then comes the Torah out of the what? Of the Rosh Chodesh portion. Why is the Rosh Chodesh Torah coming second? Why isn't the Shabbat? Because you have the rule of Tadir. The more frequent is the weekly Shabbat reading comes 52 weeks a year or whatever amount of times, and Rosh Chodesh is much less. So this is a principle that we have that we do apply. It's a serious principle of doing the more frequent item first. Even by korbanot, by offerings. If you have an offering that's not as frequent as the other offering, it's the more frequent offering that will come first. Meaning, let's say the communal offering and the musaf offering. The daily offering, and you have the musaf offering, right? The same idea. Which korban would you bring first? Would you bring the regular korban, or would you bring the musaf korban? So the musaf is not an everyday. Extra korban is not every day, and the everyday offering comes first, trumps it. So this is a very used principle of tadir. The more frequent comes, where you get it. This is a big question. Halacha, they also discuss this question. If let's say, the time for musaf, let's say musaf and mincha. Mincha doesn't kick in. Let's say today. What time could you have a mincha today? Let's say around 12:30 or so, whatever the 12, maybe even a little earlier. Let's say mincha is 12:30. Let's say it's Shabbat, and let's say this Shabbat you're running very late, and it's time to daven. And you're running late. You did shachrit. You did Kriyat Torah, and the rabbi gave a beautiful speech, and now already it's 12:30, and now the time of mincha has kicked in. What do you pray first? Do you pray mincha and then musaf, or do you say you pray now? Let's say you plan on doing, and you were planning, let's say, of doing musaf and mincha. You wanted to do everything. You're planning on doing both mitzvot. You're planning on it. It's not like you don't want to daven mincha till later. But let's say, for instance, you wanted to do both mitzvot. So there's a discussion. Do we say now you should daven mincha before musaf? Because that's more frequent. So that's a discussion in the halacha. They discuss these questions. So it's real halachic issues. Jaime, this tadir and she'ena tadir. We have to be aware of it and to see how to apply it. So the Gemara says, so that's what Rava wants to say. Rava wants to say, but that regarding lulav, it all has to do with whether you have time in the day or not after you finish your meal. So whether we'll tell you to stop your meal or not stop your meal will depend whether you have time in the day to do the mitzvah after your meal. That is what Rava wants to say. Right, we do, right. But what if the question is if a guy did not do it at the right time? So comes the Gemara and says the following. Amar Rav Zera. So Rav Zera says, my kusha. Rav Zera says he does not buy Rava's question. He says, my kusha, what's the question? You're telling me there's a contradiction in the Mishnah? Because the Mishnah says you take the lulav right when you come, if you have to stop your meal, and then the Mishnah says you have the whole day. So you thought but the fact that the Mishnah says in the second statement that if you did not take it in the morning, you take it in the afternoon, does that mean that you could go ahead and continue your meal? It doesn't mean that. It just means Dilma mitzvah lafsuke. Maybe the Mishnah is telling you the following. If you were supposed to you're supposed to take the lulav first. You came home, Morris, right? You're supposed to take the lulav first. But And then if you did not take the lulav first, mitzvah lav sukkah, you have a mitzvah to stop your meal. But the second clause of the Mishnah that says if you didn't take it in the morning, you take it in the afternoon, doesn't mean if you didn't take it in the morning, that means you could continue your meal. It just means ilo posik. If you did not stop, if you did not do, if lo posak, if you continued your meal, yitol ben arbayim. If you go ahead and you did not stop your meal, so what do you do if you did not stop your meal? So you have to know you have the afternoon. You should know that you didn't lose the mitzvah. The Mishnah's second statement of the Mishnah that says that if you did not take it in the morning, you take it in the afternoon. That's only telling you that you should know that if you did not do what you needed to do, you still have time. It's telling us how much time you have to do the mitzvah. So it's not telling us in any way that you do not need to stop your meal. The Mishnah states halacha number 1, you need to stop your meal. Halacha number 2 is you should know that if you did not stop your meal, you should know you still have time. Don't think it's over. Don't think that you only have the morning hours to take the mitzvah of lulav. Don't think it's like shachrit that shachrit ends by noontime. And after noon, once it's past noon, you can't do the mitzvah shachrit. The Mishnah is telling you that if you did not do it by the morning hours, it's coming to tell us that you have the whole day to do the lulav. If you didn't have in the morning, right?
You would just take the lulav and say Hallel, period, the end.
Right. If you didn't take it in the morning, you should do it the first opportunity. You should go ahead and do it. Take the lulav. You know what that's like? There are people who don't have a lulav and not religious person. You give them the lulav and let them do it. Let them do it. Right, but technically, that's every mitzvah is another mitzvah. Ideally, they should say halal too. But whether they're going to say the halal, they're not a religious person or not. At least it's 1 minute to go ahead and they say bracha and shake the lulav. But to go ahead and to halal is a much more longer mitzvah. So Ella Amar Rav Zera. So Rav Zera says, L'olam kedamina mekara. Really, he wants to say that Rav Safra is coming not to address a contradiction in our Mishnah. He's coming to address a contradiction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah Shabbat. We're back to Mincha. That why is it that by Mincha, the Mishnah states that you have to go ahead and if you're not supposed to start Mincha, it's not supposed to start a meal if it's time to do daven Mincha. But if you started your meal, you could continue your meal. You don't have to stop it. Continue your meal, and then you could continue and then daven mincha. And why is it by lulav you have to stop your meal? Now we said earlier, what do you mean? What's the question? The reason why you have to stop your meal by lulav because it's a mitzvah min Torah, and over there mincha is the Rabbanan. So comes Rav Zera and he says no, because our Mishnah is talking about the time of the holiday with the lulav is also the Rabbanan. What day is that? The second day. The second day of Yom Tov. Let's say second day, third. But the first day is biblical. Only the first day is biblical. The rest is rabbinic. So then it's a match. If it's the mincha is Rabbanan, lulav the rest of the holiday after the first day is the Rabbanan. So now that we got a match, so why, if they're both equal playing field, why are we more lenient by mincha and more strict by lulav, right? That's the question. But here we're not talking not the tadir which comes first. Why is that we stop the meal to take the lulav and we don't stop the meal to daven mincha? So to that he says that the Gemara says because Yom Tov Rabbanan. He said, and why is it? And the answer is because the circumstances, whether it's for the time of the day. The case of our Mishnah where he stops the meal to take the lulav, he came back from traveling. He was traveling on Chol Hamoed. He came back from traveling when he came back in the afternoon. And therefore, there's very little time left in the day. And the window is daylight. So therefore, what does he have to do? His window is daylight, and he might run out of time because he came back from his traveling. It's afternoon. There he has to stop his meal, because if he continues his meal, he might miss out the mitzvah. Because by the time the meal is over, it's dark already. Very good. But the case of mincha that the Mishnah was talking about was the mincha time kicked in. Let's say 12:30 kicked in, or whatever that time is kicked in, and you have a lot of hours left in the day to do mincha. It's not the end time. It's the mincha kicked in, and nevertheless, even though mincha time kicked in, you should not have started your meal. That's why the Mechaber of Shulchan Aruch says, don't start your meal, even though it's 12:30, 12 o'clock, even half hour before mincha time. Don't start a bread meal. If you have a minyan to go to later, no problem. But that you have a set time to daven. But if a person does not have a mincha minyan to go to later on, and he plans on davening b'yachidut by himself, the language of the Shulchan Aruch is that you should not start your meal, even early, because you should not start your meal. Because the mitzvah of mincha here has come. In general, there's another mitzvah. There's another thing called zrizim makdim l'mitzvah. You have a mitzvah to do it at the first earlier time. But sometimes sometimes there might be a reason why you say, I'll do that later for whatever reason. But now kicks in a different law. If you're not davening mincha with a minyan later, and now it's time for mincha, you're going to be davening by yourself. You should not start a bread meal. Yes. Oh, so that's what the Gemara. That's what he wants to say. The Mishnayot are talking about two different timing periods. One. It's not to say that the only apple to apple that they're both rabbinic. The level of responsibility, the obligation of the mitzvot are apple to apple. They're both rabbinic obligations. But the situation of one Mishnah that says you can continue eating even though you should not have started, and then in the continuation of the other Mishnah that says you should not continue eating, is because we're talking about how much time is left in the day. That's what he says. Kasha l'chad daraita d'Rabbanan. Right. That's a new halacha. That's not, the Gemara doesn't discuss that point. But the mincha, the point of having a minyan should allows a person that even though the time of mincha has come, I could still go ahead and sit down to a bread meal. It's 3 o'clock. Let's say today, mincha maybe I'm guessing is around 4:45. I don't know, whatever the time. I don't know what time the mincha is. If you want to have a bread meal at 4:15, you want to have a small. Technically, you could have a small bread meal at 4:15 because you have a minyan. You're going to go to 4:45. We don't say don't have a sandwich because it's time for mincha. You have mincha. You're going to go at 4:45 to the minyan, and that's the same thing with arvit at night. Let's say in my neighborhood there's a 10:10 marriage. Arvit 10:10. You can have a bread meal at 7 o'clock. Right, exactly. Right. For lulav, they're going to say you have to go ahead and again, according to this opinion, right. You're always going to have exactly lulav. You have to take the lulav first. But if you started your meal, so now this opinion says it depends how much time you have left in the day. If you have, depending on what hour of the day we're talking about, whether you have time to continue performing the mitzvah. And the Gemara says, the kasha l'chad daraita d'Rabbanan, Our Mishnah is talking about apple to apple. It's talking about Yom Tov Sheni. It's after the first day of Yom Tov, and therefore it's a rabbinic mitzvah. And therefore he says, and the Gemara says, Dekanami. The language of the Mishnah seems to also indicate this idea that it's talking about Yom Tov Sheni, because after the first day, the case of the Mishnah says if you're traveling and you don't have a lulav, so when are you going to be coming back from a traveling trip? You don't come back from a traveling trip on the first day of the Yom Tov. You came home on the holiday from a travel. That means you came home on Chol Hamoed. You didn't come back. You don't come home from travels on the first day of the holiday. That means you might have traveled. You can't travel certain distances on Shabbat. You can't travel, so you can't go out of Tchum. There's certain things. So if you traveled, it sounds like you might have traveled a decent amount of you traveled certain amount. It has to be. Also, it says Misha Baba Derech. You came from the Ein Biyoda Lulav. You didn't have a lulav. The Isaka Daitach, because you didn't have a lulav where you were traveling. The Isaka Biyoda Rishon. If we're talking about the first day of the holiday, Mishari, you don't have the right. Who has the right to travel on such a long distance on the holiday? You can't go, let's say, 2,000 amot outside the city. You can't go a certain amount of feet outside the city, traveling outside the city limit. So therefore, this was a rabbinic mitzvah that you were faced with, and because you were faced with a rabbinic mitzvah, that's therefore they're both of equal importance, and therefore that's why there is a question. Because if one would have been a biblical mitzvah, and one would have been a mitzvah, there would not have been a question to begin with. Look, Hasha, but they're both equal mitzvahs. And now the question is, why is one more strict than the other? It's for the Gemara because of a practical situation. Because one, there's a concern you won't have any time left to do the mitzvah. So therefore, if you started your meal, you have to stop the meal. The other case for Minchai was there is time left in the day. Therefore, there's time left there. Even though you should not have started your meal, but you know what? If you started your meal, you could go ahead and continue the meal as long as you have time in the day. I want to tell everybody that the other day, we were discussing about the waving of the lulav, and I took out the orod Sfardik. I know Mark likes the orod. I know about that, so I made sure we took out something that Mark likes because it has a lot of beautiful instructions and beautiful details. Yes, we like the Tfilas Rachel Siddur too, Mr. Hebra. I want to tell you, let's gotta be careful over here. We love the Tfilas Rachel Siddur, but the next edition of Tfilas Rachel, Mr. Haber is going to make sure there's more instructions and more details. If I could suggest, Dave, you don't mind my suggestion. Okay, thank you very much. You like that, right? Yes, David. Right. So the mission, So the answer. That's why Rav Safra in the Gemara, the rabbi in the Gemara, had to address why is it that both are rabbinic mitzvot. One is mincha, and one is lulav, and one we're more strict. One case we say if you started your meal, you have to stop the meal. Call up the rabbi. Rabbi, do I have to stop the meal? The rabbi says you don't have to stop your meal. In one case, the rabbi says you have to stop your meal. Right? Rabbi, I forgot to take my lulav. I didn't take it yet. I started my meal. Do I have to take the lulav? So the rabbi will say, what time of the day? What we'll look at the clock. And also the rabbi will say what day. Okay, he's calling you with the phone. It's obviously it's not the first day of the holiday. But by mincha, the rabbi will say, you know what? You have time of the day. You can go ahead and continue. You don't have to stop your meal to daven mincha. So just going back to regarding we were discussing with the Hallel, the shaking of the lulav, the nanuim that we spoke about on Hallel, on holiday, we shake the lulav in different places, right? So over here, so we said that by Hodu Lashem Kitov, Kilu Olam Chasto. Let's get the places over here. Yes. We go ahead and we say, Hodel Hashem ki tov kilam chasto. That's what we wave. The first time we say, Hodel Hashem ki tov kilam chasto, we wave the lulav. Okay? Then the next time we wave the lulav in 6 directions. The next time we wave the lulav is when we say, Ona Hashem Hoshiana and Ona Hashem Hoshiana. Both times that we say Ana Hashem, we say Ana Hashem. Everybody, including the Chazan, both times they shake the lulav. So now we have, so far we've shake the lulav, so we have 3 times so far. Now where's number 4? By Hodul Hashem, there's another Hodul Hashem Kitov Kilam Chasto at the end. But which Hodu? The first time only. The first Hodu. Meaning there's 2 Hodu, at least this is what this sinner said. The first time, good morning, when you say this, at the end of the Hallel, right, Morris, all the way at the end, you have 2 Hodul Hashem Kitov Kilam Chasto. The first, while saying Hodul Hashem, the first time only, that's when you would say, that's when you would wave in all those, the 6 directions. Now, there's another important point regarding, what do you say? We wave it more. Yeah, we do it much more than you. Because the Ashkenazim, every time they say Hodul Hashem Ki Tov Kilam Chasto, number 1, so we got an extra 1 on the back, and also every time when the Chazan says, when the Chazan says, the first says Yomana Yisrael Kilam Chasto, we say Hodul Hashem Ki Tov Kilam Chasto in response to each of those statements. So when the Chazan says Yomana Yisrael Kilam Chasto, we respond Hodul Hashem Ki Tov Kilam Chasto. Yomana Beis Aaron Kilam Chasto. Yomana Yirei Hashem Kilam Chasto. So we get 4 in over there. When you get only 1 in the beginning, you start with 1 in that section. Ashkenazim gets 4 in over there. Then Ashkenazim get 2 on the Ana Hashem Moshiana. Then they get another 2 on the Hodel Hashem Kitov Kilam Chasto. We got 8. We already got 8. Sounds like that correct? You're talking about Sfardim or Ashkenazim? But Ashkenazim, there's different laws for the Chazan. Maybe you're a Chazan. But I think the congregation, unless they're different customs, different communities. But in the communities that I've seen, and we could take out the art school sitter, but in the communities that I've seen, is that they wave every Hodul Hashem Kitov. Kilam Chasto. Okay, we should check into it. We'll look.
Walk in, we would be...
Good. Yes. Okay. Okay. We'll look at it right now. I'm going to get ready for davening. Let's look at that right now. And I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. Thank you all for coming. And we do different direction also. We go very straight, this way, that way, and then we start straight ahead. East. Yes. Right.
Well, which way do we do up and down?
After we go front, right, back, left, and then we go ahead and then we go up and then we do down. Back. We don't look again, but they're supposed to do 4 directions, east, west, and then we do up and down.
Yeah,
I mean, up.
we do up and down. Way.
Right. Yes. Facing east, we do up and down. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.
They do it easy. You can't get lost.
Morris, thank you both.